that was a great message from the youth and a nice transition to the industry. She mentioned the food industry, and our next speaker is Veerle Mommaerts from BioIG, so from the industrial background, who is going to talk to us about food waste, about protein alternatives, as well as youth involvement. Welcome, Veerle, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Can you just make sure that my presentation is loaded?
Yeah, Veerle, just a question to you. Will you share it yourself, or do I have to do it? Because I think
I prefer if you can. We always have issues with Zoom.
Okay. If you then indicate to me when I need to click through.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's
okay,
perfect. Okay. Okay, thanks. I can see it. I hope all of you in the call can see it. Anyway, thank you very much for the nice introduction, and also as well, thank you for the nice opportunity given here to open this very interesting session. And today I really would like to present you an overview of how we see that innovation improves food security. So next slide, please. Yeah. So food security, it's really a complex challenge. It's multifaceted, and we identify 4 pillars there: availability, access, consumption, and stability. Or in other words, when food is available from domestic production, imports, or as a food aid, when there is also access to food from household production, local markets, or public support networks, when the quality of the food is healthy and nutritious, and when each of these factors are stable throughout the year. And of course, when we look to all of them, it's clear, and it's really hard also to imagine that there is one single government policy or a technology that can solve all of those 4 aspects on a global scale. And so we really support and think that it will take a full toolbox of flexibly applied innovations. And it's really clear that there is a need today to act, because we already have around 800 million that are suffering from hunger. Next slide, please. Yeah. So then maybe as we opened the session with, okay, now we have somebody from the industry, so maybe a fair question to ask here: what is the role of Bayer? What is the role that Bayer can play? So actually, and very briefly, in 2019, we have defined transformational commitments for 2030. And one of them is to advance carbon neutrality. So we want to reduce our carbon footprint. So 30% reduction of the field greenhouse gas emissions of the most emitting crop system in the regions where Bayer is serving by 2030. Of course, this requires working collectively. This requires innovation and also a huge advancements in agricultural technology. Secondly, we also want to work on our environmental footprint. We want to reduce this as well with 30% by 2030. And this specifically the impact of our crop protection products, and again, in the most emitting crop systems in the regions where we are serving. And then also related to smallholders, we have set a commitment because we acknowledge that they are key for food security. And today we have many smallholders, but they don't have any access to education or other tailored solutions. So our ambition here is to reach more than 100 million smallholders by 2030. This is very challenging, and this is something we cannot do alone, and we need to work there with partners. Besides that, we also support biodiversity and soil health, and we advocate for a balance between the need of crop protection products and nature conservation. Similarly, when it comes to natural resources as water efficiency, we want to provide farmers with smart solutions to better manage their resources. And of course, it is our responsibility to make sure when crop protection products are being used, that they are being used in a safe way, safe for people, safe for wildlife, and safe for the environment. Next slide, please. So along with our statements on and these commitments, another area where we are really putting a lot of focus on is food loss and waste. Because together they account for 2.5 billion tons of lost food every year. And so if we want to achieve a global food security, this must be addressed, and really at every stage. And if we then now look to the definitions of this, currently definitions of food loss, they start after the harvest. But when I now draw the attention to this slide here and the pictures that are shown at the left hand, it's really clear that it's happening at field level. At field level, farmers are confronted with the impact of climate change, like the flooding. It's at field level that harvest occurs, and that often only certain parts are harvested because of the consumer expectations. For instance, the author leaves with lettuces. And in line with these observations, also new research highlights the importance of the pre-harvest losses. Actually, in fact, 1.2 billion tons a year is lost on the farm. And this is 15% of the food that is actually lost before leaving the farm. So it's clear, if we want to support farmers, we need to make sure that they can produce more efficiently, but also that we can minimize their losses. And this all the way from the planting the seeds up to the harvesting. And if we can do that, we can really make the progress in this overlooked area. And this is where innovations comes. This is where we can play a transformational role. Next slide, please. So as we search for sustainable ways to grow the world's agricultural output, it's scientific innovations that will allow us to get more out of every parcel of agricultural land without, let's say, needing to expand that land or use more resources. And of course, this can take many forms, and I just have here highlighted 3 of them. One is the modern breeding program, where, for instance, we know that crops who are important for the food security in Africa, like maize, soybean, coalbean, cassava, and so on, that they are looked at. And with the help of modern breeding technologies, that we see how can we improve them? How can we make sure that they are better and for the climatical conditions there? How can we make them more nutritious, for instance? But besides that, you can also bring the innovations to the classic way of breeding, hybrids. We have hybrids. Hybrid rice are available for farmers. And these hybrids, they require less inputs, which is again contributing to sustainability. But on the other hand, they also perform better. So this is again supporting also these countries by being self-sufficient. And another way that we are working on and bringing in this innovation is also by helping the farmers, by empowering the farmers, by farmers getting certified and connected as such to the food value chain. So we are really here advocating for a consistent, innovation-centric policy focus. Yeah, next slide, please. Yes. So maybe a concrete example, because to make you understand what we are aiming for. And one of the examples I want to bring is an example of classic breeding and the co-benefits that go along with it. So imagine you are not here in front of your computer, you're not sitting in the Netherlands, but you are in south of India. You are at a colored tomato market where daily 300 tons of tomatoes are being handled. And the closest large city is Bangalore, where the produce arrives with local traders approximately 2 days after reaching this market. It's an important point of sale because we have there a delivery truck where crates are on, where produce is present, coming from groups of growers. So having this in mind, and then now looking to the 2 pictures that I put it on the slides, and if you look to the below picture, you see the tomatoes, classical tomato varieties grown, traditional ones. And you see it's not looking nice. And it's also not performing good. There is a lot of losses that occur along the supply chain. With this now new classic breeding bringing in as an innovation and bringing new tomato varieties where resistance packages are being built against main threatening diseases, but also where we're looking to the ways can we improve the shelf life, and in this case with 50%. Can we also make the cuticle thicker, which is important because the transport is occurring under ambient conditions. This really makes a huge difference. We can reduce losses up to 10% when this tomato makes its way through the supply chain under, again, these ambient conditions. So it's clear that there are benefits for farmers and benefits for the supply chain. But of course, it goes beyond that. If we just look to all the elements that it's contributing to, the Wageningen University have conducted a study and has looked into this. And they found that the greenhouse gas emission is reduced by 27%. So you clearly see the different benefits that classic breeding can bring. Next slide. But of course, it's not only classic breeding. There are also other innovations that can contribute to this climate positive farming and food security. For instance, GMOs. The achievements that I have just explained to you through the classic breeding, they are great, but it took us honestly 10 years to develop this variety. While when we look now to the farmers, they really need to have now solutions to be able to respond to the climate challenges. And GMOs can help. And I want to illustrate that through an example. For instance, a specialized soybean, which is called Intacta. This is a soybean that thrives without multiple herbicide and insecticide applications because of the herbicide tolerant and insecticide resistant package. This, of course, reduces then the need for tillage, but also because less interventions are necessary, it decreases the tractor passes over the field. And knowing that this is using fuels, fossil fuels, this is also reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. But besides that, it's also allowing less soil disruption and compaction to happen. And this at a large scale. And that's important because we want to be impactful. And to really demonstrate to you the change that we already can deliver and the impact that we have already today, when we look back to when this variety was introduced in South America until now, we could see that these farmers could reduce their environmental impact already by more than 30%. And that the volume of pesticides being used was reduced with 10%. For me, this is a clear example of how we can make a difference together with the farmers. Next slide, please. Of course, similar benefits for the climate, for farmers, for consumers, for the whole supply chain can be obtained also using new plant breeding innovations, like, for instance, this genome editing. This technique, of course, does not make use of any foreign DNA. However, to make that possible, it's really important that we have a consistent policy outcomes across diverse regulatory systems and existing regulatory scopes. We are working on that. We are working on that with partners. We want to achieve a regulatory environment that promotes the benefits of genome editing, alongside, of course, with the safety of it. And what you can see here on the map is, it's a snapshot of the current situation, where you see that many countries already showing green, where, of course, this means that a policy is already established. You also see Europe, New Zealand turning red. Here, dialogue is ongoing. But what you see as well is that there is a lot of gray area as well. And there today, this is not yet a political priority. Looking then to food security, to our food system being a global trade, it's clear that harmonizing these regulations will promote the distribution of innovative technologies and the seamless trade of crops that are grown in a climate positive manner. Next slide, please. Again, I want to illustrate the importance of having this global policy established with an example. Maybe a question to all of you. How many of you eat a banana? Bananas, they are the fourth most important crop in the world, but they are a danger. I don't know if you're aware of that, but they are a danger. There is a disease, Fusarium tropical race, it's called, 4, or abbreviated TR4, which is threatening the future of the banana production worldwide. Actually, the livelihood as well as the food security is at risk here, as more than 400 million people worldwide depend on bananas for food and income. And today there is no solution. Again, this year, just to show you that it's really threatening, we had an outbreak in Peru. Now there is a pre-competitive and a coordinated multi-stakeholder approach, the Global Alliance DR4, that is really building on solutions and concrete actions to manage its DR4 disease. And one of the packages that they are looking into is specifically the breeding and the genetic aspect. When I can now ask you to look to the graph, the geographical graph on the slide here, and you see the red zone and you see the yellow orange zones, these are actually the zones where bananas are being produced. Going back to the previous slide, you see that a lot of these regions were still gray. So if we want to make sure that we have bananas in the future, we need to make sure that there is this global policy established. So, next slide, please. So, of course, this is one of the technologies. There are many innovations that I could bring forward. And the last one that I would like to draw your attention on is the alternative proteins. It's clear that the accessible, affordable, healthy and sustainable protein is crucial to human nutrition and economic development. Considering then the world's population, which is growing, alternative protein sources are expected to play a growing role in fulfilling those needs, certainly while taking into account the planetary boundaries. When we then now look to today's situation, and please have a look to the right-hand side of the slide, you can already see that soybean protein used in food products is very broad, and it utilizes already different types of soybean ingredients formats. The alternative plant-based protein market is therefore ever evolving, and it continues to grow and adjust also to the consumer preferences. Actually, we have a market analysis conducted by BCG that predicts that actually 1 out of 10 portions of meat, eggs, dairy that are eaten at a global scale are very likely to be an alternative by 2035. So if we then keep on this future look and we ask ourselves the question, what type of protein will be in the center of our plate? When we look to literature, when we look to surveys, it's clear that there is a shifting in conversation ongoing. What type of protein do I want? Do I want to have a plant-based? Do I want to have a meat? Of course, the answer to this will be largely depending on the major improvements in the meat alternative formulations that can be made, and this with specific attention to the taste and the texture. Besides that, you also have the consumer level. The consumer today is more and more aware of how important nutrition is. So they are looking for personalized nutrition. But also when it comes to the diet, sustainability is important. And transparency. They want to know for where the food is coming. So also looking to industry level, there you have that these new alternative proteins, they will certainly be driving product innovations. So when we are listing all of that and bringing it together, I think it's very clear that today there is a growing hunger for protein alternatives. And it will be very interesting to see how these new innovations will be established in the years to come. I think, next slide, but I think I'm at the end. So really thank you very much for your attention, and yeah, open for any questions. Thank you.
Thanks for your presentation, Veerle. We have time for some questions, and then we will go up to Lawrence. Maybe one big question, and that would be it. You mentioned objectives in terms of what to use and in carbon emissions, but you didn't mention explicitly other planetary boundaries, such as the phosphorus and nitrogen level in soils, which are critical. So I was wondering if you had anything to say about those, and also another boundary, which is genetic diversity. You've discussed a lot GMOs or other technological prowess, and I was wondering what was your take into how you can mix that approach and the more I'd say, traditional knowledge once and the change in practices. So how do you think you can work with this other model, this other alternative model that is growing on? Because we tend to see the conversation being really polarized between a lot of technology and a lot of new things, and a battle for yield, trying to think about mid to long term, but not really convincing everyone. And the other approach, the other extreme approach, which would be going back to common practices we had a long time ago, trying to have something that maybe is not as efficient, but that can be in the mid to long term maybe better. So how do you see the way those two approaches can work together?
Yeah, thank you, Gabriel. That's certainly a challenging question you're asking right now here. And I realized
Veerle, I think you lost your sound. We can't hear you anymore.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So sorry, Gabriel. No, thank you for your question. It's certainly a very challenging question, and I was only able to bring a few of the planetary boundaries under the attention because, yeah, I cannot speak 2 hours here. But it's clear that they are all of them are of interest to us, and it's actually with innovation supported by scientific knowledge and insights that we want to also reduce the impact on these, let's say, natural resources or the soil, the land we have, the biodiversity we need to make sure there is taken care of, and so on and so forth. So making, let's say, people choose between one side or the other side, the one side where technology is driving it and innovation is driving, let's say, the future, versus, let's say, going back to how things were done before, is to me not a fair question. I think we need to use the best of both worlds here. And why should we exclude an innovation? We have science, and I think there is a lot of things in our life decisions that we take based on scientific insights. Why should that be different for agriculture?
Thanks a lot for your question. Maybe we'll have time later to keep on the discussion, and thank you for your presentation.